Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. It's my pleasure to be able to address on the perspectives of future generation in this important conference of Vision 2020, sponsored by the Epoch Foundation. As a social science researcher and a college professor for more than 25 years, I would like to provide my personal view on this important issue, a view which may not be complete or general, but hopefully can serve as the reference points for the audience. Today, we evidently face a trend of globalization, a trend neither teachers nor students could imagine a century or 5 decades ago. Facing this new globalization era, it would be natural to conjecture that the way we will educate our children must somehow change. But the question, of course, is toward what direction we should change. Next page. This is indeed an important issue, and several people have already raised their points against the social background they are familiar with. For instance, in his famous book, The World is Flat, New York Times columnist Thomas Friedman said that the United States should improve their training of mathematical and analytical capability in schools. This suggestion is intuitive because facing the era of knowledge-based economy with global market, if the Americans intend to keep their current general advantage of innovation, they have to improve their mathematical training, especially in junior high and high schools, which is indeed the cornerstone of many, if not most, innovations in physical and computer technologies. Next page. In another book, a bestseller book entitled The Impact of Rising Lower Middle Class Population in Japan, the author Omei Kenichi suggests that the Japanese education should remove of its current practice of providing standard answers to students. This suggestion also seems intuitive. For a global market with fast-changing technologies, agility is an important character of adaptation. And the Japanese practice of learning standard answers are basically inconsistent with the training of being agile in adapting. Next page. There are other education reform principles that have been raised in the past, which one can easily find in various government committee reports. For instance, the well-known No Child Left Behind principle of the United States, or the liberalization or losing tie principle of Taiwan. But again, these principles are also area-specific doses for the education systems they face in their particular society. For instance, in Taiwan, the suggestion of losing tie or liberalization was proposed in response to the abolishment of martial law in 1988. Next page. But can we say something in general? Not against any specific background, not about any specific country or problems, but to provide some general guidelines to education changes we should propose. Next. For that purpose, I would suggest that we go back to a classic book entitled The University of Utopia, written by Dr. Robert Hutchins, who was the president of the University of Chicago from 1929 to 45, and also a key person of modern general education. That book was written 57 years ago, but if we read it again, I guess we will find that most of its arguments are still valid today, even when we face the contemporary trend of globalization and knowledge-based economy. Next. In his book, Dr. Hutchins said that after the Industrial Revolution, the market scale expands, the division of labor refines, and people become more and more specialized in a narrow expertise area. Because most people are specialized, they do not know what others are doing. Therefore, in Hutchins' term, the centrifugal force of the society increases and the centripetal force reduces. Because of the trend of individual narrow specialization and the trend of increasing centrifugal force, the society cannot run smoothly. So Dr. Hutchins suggests emphasize the importance of general education to help students know more about others and to help them appreciate the work of others, and better still, to let them have some aesthetic capability in areas much broader than one's own expertise. Other than the above individual micro capability, Dr. Hutchins also hoped that students can have some fundamental understanding about the macro environment surrounding them, such as how the government runs, how the social classes are formed, how the laws rule, and how the market system works. Such general knowledge and appreciation about the environment surrounding us is what is the essence of what Dr. Hutchins called nurturing citizenship. Dr. Hutchins summarizes his points with a famous statement that the purpose of education is not to train expertise, but to nurture citizenship. Next. Even in the 21st century, I basically agree with the teaching of Dr. Hutchins. I think that the purpose of education to our children in the forthcoming decades is still to make them good citizens, except the context may be slightly different, and the way we educate them may be slightly modified. Because the division of labor is evidently more refined today than before. The centrifugal, the centrifugal force today is even stronger. Hence, nurturing citizenship remains a critical role of our future education. There are, however, several features of general education that I think I should emphasize or modify in the 21st century. Let me briefly raise them below. The first point is that although the trend of globalization makes the world more sophisticated, it also creates a lot of new opportunities that we never deemed possible. I read this example from an article I just glanced a couple of months ago. The author said a double major in computer algorithm and Nordic culture in college might be thought of as a weird combination 30 years ago. But that combination now may turn out to be a good choice for Taiwanese software engineers, engineers of computer games, if their company is thinking about selling those computer games to countries in Nordic area. In other words, globalization makes some previously incompatible areas possibly compatible. And this makes the general education, which literally or even by definition is the education without specific purposes, more valuable. Next. Secondly, because the technology and the outside environment today both change very fast compared with a century or 5 decades ago, the knowledge that should be implanted to our children is less. There's simply no point to implant something that may fade away after 6 months. So in contrast to such hardwire implantation we used to have, our future education should be more softwire to make our children capable of learning and adapting by themselves. In a fast-changing world, writing a good software program in the brain of our children is certainly more valuable than implanting a hardwire impulse response program in their brain. And that corresponds to what Omei Kenichi said about the defects of providing standard answers to Japanese students. And this is also one direction we should modify our future general education. Third, because of the globalization, the environment we use to teach our children to be familiar with is now broader and also more sophisticated. The traditional topic of community garbage pollution may now be broadened to include greenhouse gas emission worldwide. The traditional problem of damaging a common pasture is now expanded to the problem of global warming, which is a kind of damage to the common globe. The traditional tax and enforcement solution to the problem of externality may need to be modified, for the externalities in question is now across country border, and it is hard to impose sanctions across country border. The traditional concern of domestic income inequality may now be broadened to include discussions of international inequality. So in general, the global environmental problem today may be more complex than we faced several decades ago. And since there's no effective central government in the world, more cooperation rather than unilateral enforcement is expected for our child generation to deal with their global problem. Next. Fourth, 2,000 years ago, when the Greek philosopher Diogenes said, "I am not a citizen of Athens, but a citizen of the world," that statement, that idea, was treated as a rare vision. But 57 years ago, when Dr. Hutchins raised the importance of citizenship, at that time, citizenship education is treated as an important element for smooth running of the society. I would like to say that today, a broad sense citizenship is a must for our children's generation, both for their adaptation and for the smooth running of the world. Next. To summarize, concerning the education of our children's education in the forthcoming decades, I agree with Robert Hutchins that nurturing citizenship is still the most important goal. The future generation education, however, should be modified in three aspects. First, the scope of our future education should be broadened and be a world-level one. And second, our future education should focus more on software enlightenment rather than hardwire cramming. Third, our future education should be designed to liberate our children and to help them become liberal world citizens. And these are my conclusions. Thank you for your attention.